365 Radio, 365 Sports. Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch, joins us now. And, Joey, before we get into Ohio State, you used to cover USC. So, I know that you left there and joined the big dude party, but do you feel like you might have missed the kind of the rock star show that's coming to USC now with Lincoln Riley?
I guess. I mean, it seems like they finally decided to act like a college football blue blood program. I was a few years early in covering them, but it's been a remarkable 180 to see what's going on in Southern California this offseason.
Yeah. Well, interesting comments from Ryan Day the other day, and I think this is the first time, if you take out the Nick Saban barbs at the end of his speech a couple weeks ago, it was kind of doing the same thing that Ryan Day did. Ryan Day just put a number on it of $13 million that he believes the Buckeyes need to stay competitive. This kind of sticks out in that I don't think I've ever heard a coach say the exact dollar number he's figured. And if Ohio State, and I know part of this is politicking and trying to spread panic to the fan base so they don't fall behind, but if Ohio State's worried about it, then shouldn't everybody be?
Well, I think this is really the point on the college football calendar historically, where it's sort of the booster circuit, it's the fundraising circuit, and before, I think we've seen all of that really go towards facilities and improvements to the weight room, a players' lounge, and now really the pitch for coaches to boosters is the payroll, if you will. It's a case of, hey, we need to raise X amount of dollars and name, image, and likeness money that would be attainable for our players, or there's a risk that they would be plucked by another school elsewhere who is saying and whispering in the ear of a high school coach, a parent, or sliding in their DMs and saying, we'll offer you more NIL money. So I think this is what we're seeing with so many of these coaches now. I think, as you mentioned, the interesting part with Ryan Day is he's put a specific dollar amount, of sort of a fundraising goal, if you will, for Ohio State boosters and business folks around Columbus.
How would you say, because we've talked to various people from various programs, and there are some that will say, like, hey, the school needs to get its act together on NIL. Like, they're nowhere near they need to be, or they're behind the eight ball. I mean, I remember Ohio State was one of the first times I heard NIL because of Quinn Ewers a couple years back. But how would you say the program's kind of dealt with this? Have they been on the forefront of it? Have they been just in line with most? How do you feel about that?
I think they've been close to the forefront, but I think if you talk to boosters and people around Ohio State, there's a fear that they could slip a little bit behind the Texas and the Texas A&M. For a number of years, Ohio State had been really the school that had challenged Alabama for the recruiting title. Happened late during the Urban Meyer years and happened a couple just recruiting cycles ago, 2020 and 2021, where Ohio State was right by some boosters in Columbus. So that's kind of, those just launched this spring. So that's sort of where Ohio State is as far as the collectives and kind of the booster run groups.
Do you feel like there are recruits that have come in the last class specifically because of NIL? Because there A&M, nobody really knows, but I mean, there's the scuttlebutt about who it could be that came in because of NIL. Are there Ohio State players that think that is, because it's still Ohio State? People have always wanted to come play there and will always want to come play there.
Nothing really that's jumped out as far as a player who has really been able to come. I mean, Quinn Ewers is sort of a separate deal, but as far as the 2023 class or even late 22 class, I don't think a lot of those decisions were necessarily been swayed by NIL. You look at the top players Ohio State has been able to go after and get. It's been quarterback and it's been wide receiver, the two positions where you are almost guaranteed if you can get on the field and start, you're going to put up big numbers and have a chance to be a first-round pick. So I haven't really seen it yet with them where NIL has really proved to be a major difference maker in the recruiting process, but I think the 2023 class is going to be the bigger tell, because it's you look at last year in 22, a lot of guys were in the fold and committed before NIL really became a factor in their recruitment. But this cycle, I think it's been a more of a talking point among high school players and the coaching staff.
Joey, what was the reaction to Ryan Day's new deal?
His contract extension, you mean?
Yeah, contract extension, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the timing of it is a little weird in Columbus circles, just because this is a year where, hey, they lost to Michigan, and that's supposed to happen. It hasn't happened in a decade. So I think it's maybe a reason why you saw his contract extension be announced in May instead of, or April, excuse me, or no, May, instead of like December or January or February of last year. Some distance always helps. But a lot of this is just due to Mel Tucker really resetting the coaching market. His $9.5 million year salary, now Ryan Day's in that $9.5 million contract. So I think for a lot of Ohio State fans, there's some disappointment of how last season went, and they want to see more from Ryan Day and his program moving forward. I mean, they've won one playoff game in his tenure. I think the expectation is to get back to the national championship game and win it. But I think there's also a point of pride in that Ohio State wants to pay its coach as much or more than anybody else in the Big Ten. It's been the standard bearer. It's been the flagship program for the league, and they want to have their head coach with a salary to match that.
Do you think NFL rumors will continue to follow him?
I think so, and I think just you look at the track record he has on the offensive side of the ball with the passing game, and that's certainly where the NFL's gone in that direction. You've seen with Sean McVay, and there's only a couple off-season cycles ago where that was so in demand, where everybody wanted a coach who could really engineer a passing offense like that. So I think because of that, and because of his background in the NFL, it's always going to be something that's going to be lured in the background. And the interesting part will be if a team ever gives him a contract where it's going to be able to match his Ohio State salary or more, because the more and more these guys start getting paid in college, the other side of the coin is there are very few NFL teams that offer you more than $9-10 million.
Yeah, I mean, I need to look up the NFL coaches' salaries actually and see even where those guys are, because I would imagine there's a good number of college coaches now making more than most. Maybe not like a Pete Carroll; he's probably still high, but yeah, I mean, $9 million. We're starting to get up there, Joey. Joey, on the recruiting side of things here in Waco, it was of interest that a couple of days ago, Ohio State offered a Baylor quarterback commit Austin Novosad. I know that Ohio State doesn't have a quarterback, I believe, in this upcoming class. Do you really keep track of that very much? And if so, your thoughts on, that's a school that when they offer a quarterback, people take notice. Your thoughts on them extending an offer to Austin Novosad?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he goes about his recruitment by Ohio State now that he's in the picture. Ohio State doesn't have a 2023 quarterback in the fold, and if he does reciprocate the interest from Ohio State, maybe wants to go here, he's going to be sandwiched between Devin Brown, who was a top recruit in the 2022 class, and Dylan Raiola, who's one of the top quarterback recruits in the 24 class. So if he comes, it's going to be quite a battle for the starting quarterback job, as we've seen with Ohio State. Guys who have come and competed for a job and maybe not won out have been able to go elsewhere. Joe Burrow most notably, but even Jack Miller transferred to Florida, Quinn Ewers go to Texas. So I think the risk in going to Ohio State, and maybe you go to Ohio State, maybe you don't get on the field, is mitigated by the fact that, well, you can go to Ohio State and maybe you don't get win the starting job, but you get a couple years of Ryan Day's tutelage under your belt and you go somewhere else and start. So I think that's kind of become a little bit of the way things have gone in Ohio State. And I think the transfer portal, eases some of the risk for these guys if they do decide to go to the Buckeyes.
Joey, Jim Knowles, the new defensive coordinator hired from Oklahoma State, and the knock on Ohio State last year was, in spite of their high flying offense and everything he'd do, they were pretty soft on defense, especially up front. How did you see that coming through the spring with improvements on defense or things that had changed? And was it a talent issue or a coaching issue alone, or was it a talent issue as well?
I think some of both. I mean, it's no secret that Ohio State's drop-off on defense has come in the aftermath of 2019, where they had Chase Young and Jeff Okudah. Those guys were the number 2 and number 3 overall picks in the NFL draft, and they haven't really had that elite defensive end pass rusher since Chase Young. They haven't had a cornerback of the likes of Okudah. So they haven't had really the talent that they had in past years as far as that high end. But they also have kind of run a pretty basic defense and scheme. And the most interesting part about Knowles is how multiple he wants to be, how much he wants to disguise stuff, and how much he wants to put an offense off balance. It's always seen the last couple of years, Ohio State just sort of leaned into its talent on defense, which is great when you have some of those really, really high-end NFL draft picks. But if you just have maybe some mid-round guys, it's not going to work. So I think Knowles is going to be a lot more creative in how he uses Ohio State's personnel.
How in the world does Jackson Smith and Jigba follow up that bowl game?
That's going to be really tough to do. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that quite as well, but that was certainly something.
Just for a point of reference, Baylor lost all their top wide receivers. Jackson Smith and Jigba's one game that's what 300 yards more than they all have together in one game. The new ones that they're coming in, there's people who want a whole season that he did in that one.
Yeah,
game.
he had a huge performance. Yeah, that Baylor has more yards in that bowl game. Your point than they have returning. Yeah,
exactly. It's
pretty
insane.
crazy.
Yeah, I stumbled over my words there. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, no problem. Joey, Ohio State, Notre Dame to kick off the year. I know they just met a handful of years ago. Ohio State won that game when Urban Meyer was still at the helm. I did not realize how few times, though, these teams have played each other. What kind of excitement level is there? I know Ohio State plays big banger teams every single year in the non-conference and whatnot, but is there a little bit of spice, people looking forward to that Notre Dame matchup?
It's going to be a hot ticket because you're right. Despite being in really neighboring states and being two of the Midwest powerhouses, they haven't played a whole lot in their history. And this will be the first time they've played on campus since the mid-'90s. They played the Fiesta Bowl in a couple of recent years, but this will be a home and home. Ohio State goes to South Bend next year, too. Then you also have the added factor, Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame's first-time head coach. He was a former linebacker at Ohio State and added a couple assistants with ties to the Buckeyes. Their defensive line coach is Al Washington, who was not retained last year as Ohio State's linebackers coach. And Marcus Freeman tried to poach some guys from Ohio State staff like Brian Hartline, who was rewarded with a pay bump as well and a promotion into the title of passing game coordinator. So it'll be interesting if there are any feelings that may be carried over from the hiring cycle. But I think that's going to be, you talk about Marcus Freeman, his first regular season game leading Notre Dame has to go into the horseshoe where he played as a player. I think that certainly that'll be quite a test out of the gate for him.
Yeah, no doubt. I wanted to ask you, too, before we let you go, man, there's so much talk now about the championship game rules being thrown to the wayside. Conferences can come up with their own way of doing things with divisions or pods or what have you. What are your thoughts on what the Big Ten ultimately does?
So my feelings are a little mixed because I think in some ways it's going to create, if the Big Ten gets rid of divisions, it's going to create some more equitable scheduling. If you're Indiana, if you're Rutgers, if you're Maryland, you've had a tough run these last 3 years where you have to play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State on the schedule every year, Michigan State too. So that's going to help them out a lot. But I think the thing that's going to be, I think perhaps the biggest change for the Big Ten is Ohio State, Michigan have played the end of the year for forever, for decades and decades in college football. And without divisions, there's a very strong chance. Last year, for example, if you did not have divisions in the Big Ten, Ohio State would have played Michigan that last week in the regular season, and then we would have had a rematch the following week for the Big Ten title. And what makes that rivalry so great is everything that those teams are playing for, the Big Ten title game, a spot in the playoff or a national championship is on the line. So if there's a rematch the week after for a conference title game, that takes some of the luster out of that regular season rivalry. I think that's potentially a pretty big change in sort of the flavor of Ohio State, Michigan.
Joey Kaufman, the Columbus Dispatch. Joey, thanks so much for hopping on with us today.
Hey, good talking with you guys.
Always great to talk to Joey. He's our man in Columbus.
Yeah, it's interesting times up there, to hear that the Ryan Day rumors won't stop. I guess you can just kind of lump them in that Matt Campbell group of no matter what you sign, no matter what you pledge or what you say at a press conference, people are always going to still be looking to poach you or assuming that you're going to be poached by somebody. Maybe even Dave Aranda could be thrown in there as well after all the teams that were apparently linked to him last year. But certainly Matt Campbell and Ryan Day fit that bill. I guess James Franklin too, just in terms of guys are like, they can commit all they want, but you're still going to always wonder if they're really going to stick around for as long. So I can see why he would be in high demand, but it got to make you feel a little bit better that, he at least put pen to paper. Although, again, it doesn't necessarily matter in the long run. But, yeah, I mean, Ohio State,